Don Mancuso is a true legend of the Rochester music scene. For decades, he's been a driving force behind some of the area's most iconic bands, including Black Sheep, Aurora, the Lou Gramm Band, Johnny Smoke, Cheater, DDrive, Lips Turn Blue, and Linda Rutherford in Celtic Fire. With countless performances, recordings, and collaborations under his belt, Don's talent and dedication have left an unforgettable mark on the region's musical history. Now, as Black Sheep is inducted into the Rochester Music Hall of Fame, Don sits down for a special one-on-one interview, reflecting on his incredible journey, the music that shaped him, and the unforgettable moments from a career that continues to inspire. Tell us about the first time you picked up a guitar.
Well, the first time I picked up a guitar was when I was probably 5 or 6 years old. My parents had bought me a little toy one, and I played around with it, and they thought I had some potential, so they went out and got me a real Sears and Roebuck guitar and started me on lessons, and had me playing the Tarantella and every other favorite that they wanted to hear.
What role did music play in your house growing up?
Music was a big part of our household growing up. My parents were into dancing, listening to music. They had the old, what did they call them, with the one speaker, the turntable, and the amp all in one, like a console. And it was going day and night.
Who were your earliest music influences?
Some of my first influences when I was actually starting to play somewhat seriously were like Jimi Hendrix, Jeff Beck. Paul Kossoff was eventually kind of who I gyrated to, more of an R&B blues type of thing, but I still love Celtic jazz, funk, R&B, alternative metal. I mean, I can appreciate any of it, but yeah, those are my main influence. People like Eric Clapton, of course, were real popular, so I was hearing them all the time, even if I wasn't copying all their licks.
How did you first fall in love with rock and roll?
When I got into junior high school, I saw my first live band in the gym, and that was it. I was like awestruck, thinking, wow, I should have stuck with this. I would love to do this. And it had an energy that, different energy than what my parents really listened to. It was just an experience that I had never had, seeing someone playing live in a gym, going through these songs that I really, loved and listened to on records. And it was just, it definitely got a hold on me, and that was it. I was convinced I had to do that, maybe not for the rest of my life, but for that period of it.
How did you first learn to play guitar?
I actually learned guitar with lessons the first time, so I knew how to read and write music, and then I abandoned that, thought I was going to be a baseball star, failed miserably, okay, go out in right field and don't do anything. And when I was in 7th grade, I saw that band, and I decided I was going to go back and teach myself, and I became self-taught up until I got into Black Sheep and started recording albums on an international level. And I had a good ear, but I did end up going back to college after that for it, just to be able to not be talked down to by other musicians and new theory and all that.
What challenges did you face as a young musician?
I faced a lot of challenges. I think the main ones were peer pressure, politics. The politics in music was unbelievable. It wasn't who, what you know, it's who you know, and the opportunities were very slim for people like me and the bands I was associated with. That's how we got the name Black Sheep. It was because we were voted the most likely to fail.
Tell us about your first gig. How did it go?
Yeah, my first gig was a good memory. It was at the tennis courts in Greece with a band called Maelstrom, who had been, in the basement for the year or two before and working out songs and doing things like Deep Purple and blues and boogies and stuff. And there were probably 100, little teenage kids there with us about the same age, and they went nuts and loved it, even though it probably might have sounded like, I think if I would have been there, I might not have liked it too much, but it was a fun gig. I had a lot of good time, and I got the bug for playing live. I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to conquer it, because at that point I really was afraid to be in front of people. I didn't like people staring at me. And that's what that's all about.
Did you have any role models that shaped your journey?
I had many mentors who helped me sculpture my musical journey. I had the first bands I was in through high school, all those musicians that kind of showed me the ropes as far as musically what to do, coming up with your own sound. And then when I graduated from high school, I was in with a bunch of veterans that, those guys were the shit. and they basically kicked my ass into a position where I had to, get it together and do the right thing at the right time, and hone my style, not worry about, as much, it's how you look and how you act and whatever, but to get a style going.
What was the Rochester music scene like?
The Rochester music scene when I started out was actually pretty healthy. They had a lot of opportunities for both young and older professional musicians. They had everything from the Grange dances, where they would have, most of the older, more professional bands coming in so we could see them and get exposed to them. And we had our high school and junior high events and parties that we would play for. The bar scene was actually thriving then. Top 40 bands were going and playing, a month at a Holiday Inn doing stints, they were actually doing it up. So it was all really good. At the concert scene, technology hadn't gotten up to that point yet. In the 70s, it was getting ready. But we had a lot of bands that would come into town, national acts, and I'd get to go see them. First national act that I went to see was Emerson, Lake and Palmer at the Rochester War Memorial. Yeah, that was a great concert. I was like blown away. I'm not a keyboard player. I learned how to play eventually, but that was like impressive to see someone that was that into it and that good, especially when he took the freaking Hammond organ and spinning it around, jumping on it, doing handstands on it. I'm like, whoa, that's entertainment.
How did venues like Penny Arcade shape your career?
Basically, places like the Penny Arcade shaped my career by giving us the opportunity to do what we do in front of a crowd, the public, or people that we didn't know, and bringing our friends in, and they did a good job with it. They kept us off the streets and doing the right thing.
Describe a typical night playing out with Black Sheep.
Get up, go to Buffalo, usually around dinner time, walk in, get all the gear set up. We actually had a road crew at that time, which was a real treat. So you'd actually have energy to do a 3 or 4 hour show. And we get the sound check done, probably hang out, drink until we had to play, and then we would start playing usually about 10 or 11 o'clock. And they'd have another band opening or playing back to back with us, and we'd go on, and it was loud and proud. It was it was the old days where you didn't mic guitars, or the only thing that was mic'd were vocals and maybe a kick drum. That was it. But it was a lot of fun, and it was a long night. It would go until usually 3 in the morning. We'd play actually till 3 in the morning. Eventually head back to Rochester watching the sunrise.
How competitive was the music scene at that time?
It was about the same as it is now. There were a lot of talented musicians, a lot of great bands. I mean, it was, if you basically had to find your niche in there, and if you were doing something that people liked, you drew crowds, and you did well. If not, you struggled for a while and decided if you wanted to move on and do something else. And yeah, it was still as competitive. Maybe it's more competitive today though, because I mean they actually have schools of rock and all this stuff, so the kids are more out there. Their parents are pushing them.
Do you feel Rochester and Buffalo supported local musicians?
Absolutely. Yeah, they did. I mean, everybody gave them a bad rap because they couldn't really afford to do it as much as bringing in the famous and the international musicians who would make them money, but that's how they generated the income to be able to take risks with bands like ours.
Were there any local bands you looked up to?
Oh God, yeah. There was a band early on called High Pockets who eventually went into Mars St. Miller, and then into a band called Duke Jupiter, who actually got signed and became, internationally famous for a while.
Share a memorable story from those early gigs.
I think the best story out of the ones I remember from that era is a show we had offered last minute for Black Sheep to open up for one of our heroes, Peter Frampton, at the New York Academy of Music. It was like the dream come true. We've all made it. Okay, we're going to New York to play in front of Frampton. And we got out on stage, and all we could hear was people booing and yelling, "Montrose, Montrose." I'm going, wow, I heard that band on the radio on the way in. They're good. Sammy Hagar, Ronnie Montrose. Turns out that Montrose was supposed to be the opener. They sold all these tickets for the show, and Frampton hadn't done the Alive album yet, so we got booed off the stage. Very humbling experience, and thank God it was the only time it ever happened.
What role did local media play in promoting Black Sheep?
Local media and radio played a large part in helping us get our foot out the door instead of in the door to get out of Rochester. They provided not only shows that we were able to play because we were original and we didn't need to be a cover band, but they also we had a guy here named Uncle Roger that used to run, him and Bernie Kimball used to run a show that was local. It was just local original artists on the radio, and it was a great vehicle for bands like ours to get our music out there to people on the radio. Even if it wasn't prime time, we were hitting a lot of people. There was also a television show at the time. They did a local version of Midnight Special, and that was another one where they were hiring bands like getting bands in like Duke Jupiter, Aurora, Black Sheep, anybody that was doing originals, any genre was great.
What were the albums that inspired your musical growth?
There were several different genres of albums that influenced or kind of pushed me in a certain direction musically, from Emerson, Lake and Palmer to Free. I used to listen to Free, Fire and Water, Free at Last, and more of the English bands, but still there were a lot from this country that I was influenced. I had a wide range of interests in different genres, from anything from punk to funk to R&B, blues, rock, alternative. I can't honestly say I heard an album and I decided to make myself that, because I knew I could never do that. But everything I listened to, my friend that I was growing up with used to call me the human sponge, because it seemed like everything I listened to, I would be able to absorb the content out of it, and not reiterate it exactly, but use it to my benefit.
Did you ever meet any of your early music idols?
Oh God, yes. on the Black Sheep tours and Lou Gramm tours, I interacted with a lot of them. Anybody from Todd Rundgren to Elvin Lee of 10 Years After, Blue Oyster Cult, Kiss. Meeting the idols, I never had a bad story. I mean, if they were standoffish, it wasn't anything big. They were just standoffish and you didn't really associate with them. But we used to hang backstage on the 10 Years After tour. Before every show, Elvin Lee, one of my idols. The guy could play, sing. Used to smoke a blunt about that big and that fat. And the funniest part is, usually when you're smoking pot or marijuana, you pass it around. He'd smoke the whole thing himself before he went on stage. And I just look at him and go, how do you do it?
How have your influences evolved over time?
Just grown in different ways. My influences have taken few different paths. I never was into country. It's not my main mode of music that I listen to, but now I'm influenced by it because it's kind of relating to a classic rock feel, and it's bringing me back to the original country that I really like all the original country artists that did real country. And I think I've opened up a lot more influence-wise to alternative, electronic, EDM, things like that. It's just there's an energy to all of it, even hip hop. I mean, I'm not a hip hop fan, but my friends and family have turned me on to hip hop bands that I was like blown away by.
What are the non-musical influences that impacted your songwriting?
Yeah, there were plenty of influences that affected my songwriting. Love, heartbreak, being dumped, being ridiculed by others, and looked down upon, or, just a lot of issues in the world, I mean, we wrote about everything from politics to, to love.
How did Lou Gramm influence Black Sheep's sound?
Well, basically, Lou Gramm's style affected Black Sheep in a big way because we wanted to feature him, to get him out front and make him the focal point. You want to do what's right for the singer that makes him look and sound his best. And it worked. In a big way.
Did touring with acts like Kiss and Aerosmith change how you approach music?
Touring with bands like Kiss and Aerosmith did change the way I approach music. I looked at it in a whole different light because I could see how they got to where they were, and it was a path I chose to basically take everything I've done pretty much at this point, trying to write, record, come up with something new. Yeah, I probably picked up a few tips and road rules by watching their behaviors before and after shows and deciding which way to go. I think I chose to go one way for a while and then and go eventually get to the other way. There's a lot of bad influences on the road. I mean, anybody that's had a road job and of any sort, they know that, there's a lot of downtime. And what do you do at downtime? Usually drink or do drugs or whatever's available. So you can get caught up in a real nightmare. But it's pretty much like a split decision. Half go one way, half go the other way. And I've done both.
Talk about how Black Sheep formed.
Black Sheep was brought together as a band, actually, initially with Lou playing drums, his brother Richard on guitar. I can't remember who was the bass player, but they had Larry Crozier on keyboards. And they weren't really all original when I first saw them. I was in high school. I remember being at a party, sitting on the floor watching them and going, wow, these guys are amazing. They were doing Traffic and all this stuff that I really loved. Eventually, what came to pass was Lou wanted to come out front and sing so he could focus more on his singing, and because he was a great drummer. But I got another drummer, another bass player, Bruce Turgan, and Richard was still the guitar player. They were going three-piece with Ronnie Rocco on drums, and they had an opportunity to go on this kind of tour. It was basically the Mohawk Trail restaurant and bar tour, and they went out on the first one in '73. Yeah, it was '73 while I was still in my last year of high school, and they had a falling out. Richard left the band. They came back home and were looking for a guitarist. I was playing with this band Maelstrom, the one we were speaking of earlier, on a flatbed out in back of a little grammar school in front of a few hundred people, and there were houses. It was weird because it wasn't like on a road. It was more like embedded in a neighborhood, so houses all around it. Well, the bass player from Black Sheep had just driven in from Massachusetts, passed out on his girlfriend Lila's couch, and I had my first Marshall 50 with an 810 bottom. It was my first gig, so you can only guess what I did with it. You got to find out what it'll do. And I had it dimed, and it was like, wow, it sounded great. Apparently it sounded great where he was too, sleeping. I woke him up off the couch. He came over and said, hey, you're pretty good. You want to audition for our band? I go, what band? He goes, Black Sheep. I go, oh, yes, I'd love to. And from there, I think the only changes from there that were made were really the drummer. After the first album, we got Mike Bonafide on drums for the second album and the second tour.
Tell us about the most memorable show Black Sheep played.
Yeah, I think the most memorable show with Black Sheep was we did a show with Todd Rundgren outdoors in Buffalo, and that was a real memorable show. It was a gorgeous day, looking up this beautiful hill with all these people up there having fun. That was definitely a really good show.
What was the most rewarding part of being in Black Sheep?
Most rewarding parts of Black Sheep were just playing with a bunch of musicians that were very serious about what they did and took it to heart. They wanted something that they'd leave behind that represented the best they could do.
How was being inducted into the Rochester Music Hall of Fame impacted you?
I'm very humbled by it. I know I've worked hard and I'm probably really good at what I do, but there's many musicians that they get passed over for this, and that would be at the same level and deserve it just as much as I do. But it's basically given me accolades and recognition from people that I never even knew could give to whatever's about me, and it's it feels rewarding. I feel like I haven't done all this in vain.
What advice would you give to young musicians today?
The advice that I would give a young musician trying to make it in music today would be to just stay true to what your beliefs are. Even if people tell you, oh, that's not what's popular, you know, you got to do this is what's popular. That's okay, you know, if you want a temporary, you know, boost in your career or whatever, but it's not going to do anything for your longevity and to establish you as an artist.
What is something you wish you had known starting out?
I think the main thing I would have loved to have known about when I was first starting out was some more of the theory, how to interpret, because I had good listening skills, but I didn't know how to mathematically put it together and know what I was doing. So it was kind of the poke and stab method instead of the, oh, I love that mode, I'm gonna master that mode.
What collaborations or projects are you especially proud of?
The projects I've been most proud of have been working with Lisa G out of Chicago. She's an amazing talent and just great voice. I mean, when I met her, I had no clue she was a musician, and then next thing I know, I'm recording 2 or 3 of her albums, and I'm playing with Kenny Arnoff and Carmine Appice and all James Lomenzo, and it's like she's very serious about what she does. She's great. And I think the other one would be Johnny Smoke. That was another real feather in the cap, and I think the piece de resistance would be DDrive, the original DDrive with Phil Nero, Joe Lana.
What is a moment in your career that felt surreal?
I think the biggest moment in my career when it felt surreal was when they took me into New York City, into Manny's music, which was like, you know, you walk in and you want to just like bow down, and and they offered me 3 guitars that I would never be able to afford. You know, it was just like, really, you're just going to give them to us? Oh yeah, okay. That was very surreal to me.
If you could relive one moment from your career, what would it be?
Wow, reliving one moment of my music career. That's a good one. I mean, I've had a lot of great moments. It's hard to just like take one out and figure it out. Oh, playing B.B. King's club in New York City. That was you know, driving in New York in a tour bus and pulling into New York, being treated like a star. That was a pinnacle moment for me.
What is next musically for Don Mancuso?
I do have a lot of plans and projects I'm going to be working on. Still going to be following through with more Johnny Smoke material. I'm actually hoping to put together another rendition of DDrive. Other than that, I'm hoping to just work with other musicians in different genres and be able to use my style to incorporate in their music. Writing and recording is kind of the priority right now for me. I'm trying to free up my live schedule and push gigs aside and record and write.
And that's the story up until this moment. From the smoky clubs of Rochester to national tours, countless recordings and collaborations with some of the best in the business, Don Mancuso's journey has been shaped by heart, hustle, and a deep love for the music. He's been a driving force behind some of the area's most iconic bands, always staying true to his roots while evolving with every note. Now with the incredible honor of being inducted into the Rochester Music Hall of Fame, It's a moment to look back with gratitude, but also forward with excitement. Because for Don, the music never stops. New stages, new songs, and new memories are always on the horizon. After all, where else is there to go but up?